raise the risk level to high on violent protests. My question to you is, how far away are we from something much more substantial in the form of civil war or something equivalent in that style to 2020? How close are we?
Thanks, Manus. Yeah, I don't think we're approaching civil war. There's obviously a huge amount of popular anger towards the ruling political class over its kind of corruption and incompetence. And like you noted, we have raised our civil unrest rating because we do think that there will be sustained unrest in the capital, a lot of it focused on kind of major political institutions. And because of this, the rage that this explosion has induced, a lot of it is likely to be quite violent. But I don't think anyone in the political class or in the population really has an appetite for civil war. And if you look at the kind of broader scene in the country, there's no real forces that could kind of fight the civil war. Hezbollah dominates the country. It has a monopoly over violence, and I don't think there's any kind of force in the country that could challenge it in any type of armed way.
We're just looking at images here of the Prime Minister sitting down with the country's president, and it is the head of state who has made some recent remarks around potential interference from abroad, parties being involved outside of Lebanon with this blast. To what extent would you say is there a chance that a scenario materializes where you need to redirect a lot of the unrest and the anger abroad and come to a conclusion where maybe Israel or maybe another party had an involvement with this bombing, and as a result of that, the risk of a conflict outside of borders becomes a lot higher?
Yeah, I also think that's a relatively unlikely scenario. I mean, obviously, the kind of political class is searching for scapegoats and for ways to deflect blame and responsibility for this tragedy. And like you said, President Aoun has kind of made some hints at potential foreign involvement. But, I don't think there will be any real evidence that emerges of that. I think the international community will really push back on any government attempts to divert the blame, and kind of not allow the international aid effort that's coming to be held hostage to the Lebanese government trying to kind of avoid responsibility. And I think you've seen Hezbollah doesn't really have any appetite for engaging in a confrontation with Israel. They haven't made any remarks blaming Israel. So I think, you'll continue to see these types of conspiracy theories maybe floated, and, that might kind of assuage, some segments of the population's anger, but I don't think it'll be used to start any type of conflict.
Look, we have the prospect of elections. Lots of names are in the frame in terms of who might be the potential next premier. Nawaf Salam, the former ambassador to the United Nations, is one of those names. From a control risk perspective, what kind of leader does it take to change the narrative and shift the dynamic for the people of Lebanon?
Yeah, I think that's a very tough question because I don't know that there's a good answer to that. When the protests occurred last October, there were demands for a technocratic government, and we got a quasi-technocratic government in the government of Hassan Diab and some of his ministers. You saw some of the political forces push back against that initially and kind of say that, to make the difficult decisions that are needed, you actually require a political cabinet. And I think we found with the Diab government that, for all maybe some of the good intentions of Prime Minister Diab himself and others, they weren't able to make any real decisions because power didn't lie in their hands. It lies with this entrenched political class. So any new technocratic government is going to face the same problems. At the same time, I don't think, the kind of reigning political forces are going to allow any truly political independence to come to power. And so we're more likely to see the return of some familiar names or, maybe some slightly less familiar names, but ones who are still beholden to the major political parties in the country. And they're ultimately going to be unwilling to take real, substantial and genuine steps towards political reform.